The jungle pressed in on Peeka. He could feel its breath on his skin, hot, oppressive. The air hung heavy with the scent of decay and blooming rot. Vines thick as a man's arm snagged at his legs. He hacked at them with his machete, each swing a burst of effort in the stifling humidity. Peeka was on a sacred mission. His village, nestled at the jungle's edge, awaited the return of the emissaries. Holy men from the great city, they came seeking tribute, an offering to appease their ancient gods. This year, the burden fell upon Peeka. He was to be the hunter. The jungle was a labyrinth. Twisting pathways, choked with vegetation, offered no clear path. The sun, a malevolent eye peering through the canopy, offered little guidance. Peeka pushed onward. His muscles ached. Sweat stung his eyes. Still he pressed onward. Failure was not an option. He carried the weight of the village on his shoulders. Their hopes for a bountiful harvest, their prayers for protection from the spirits that haunted the jungle's heart. Peeka knew the dangers that lurked within the green depths. But he was a hunter, and fear was a luxury he could not afford. Days blurred together. The jungle held time captive. Peeka lost track of the hours, marked only by the relentless cycle of sun and suffocating darkness. He scavenged for food, berries tough and tasteless, grubs wriggling and fat, anything to keep his strength up. The capybara appeared as if summoned by Peeka's desperate need. A giant rodent, fat and slow, it grazed by the riverbank. Peeka froze. He felt a surge of primal hunger, but also a deep respect for the creature. It was a worthy offering. With a silent prayer to the forest spirits, Peeka drew back his spear. The muscles in his arm coiled like a sprung trap. The spear flew, a perfect arc. It found its mark, piercing the capybara's thick hide. The creature let out a bellow, a sound that echoed through the silent trees. Peeka felt a pang of remorse, but it was quickly replaced by a surge of pride. He had succeeded. He had captured the offering. His village would be safe, for now. The return journey was a blur. Exhaustion fueled Peeka's every step. He emerged from the jungle's embrace, blinking in the sudden wash of sunlight. The village came into view, huts huddled together, seeking comfort in their proximity. Children played in the dirt, their laughter a balm to Peeka's weary soul. The emissaries had arrived. Their arrival had been heralded by the beating of drums, a low rhythmic pulse that resonated deep within Peeka's chest. He approached the clearing at the center of the village. The villagers parted, making way for him and his burden. Two figures stood before the crude altar, draped in robes of woven feathers and polished bone. Their faces were obscured by intricate masks. One depicted a snarling jaguar, the other a serpent, its fangs bared in a silent snarl. The emissaries exuded an aura of power, ancient and unsettling. Peeka felt a shiver run down his spine. He had always been taught to revere the emissaries, to view them as conduits to the gods, but standing before them now he felt a creeping unease. Something about their stillness, their silence, it felt wrong. The air crackled with anticipation. The villagers had gathered. Their faces, etched with a lifetime of hardship, were alight with a mixture of fear and reverence. This ritual was sacred. A pact between their humble lives and the whims of the gods. A pact sealed in blood. The emissaries moved with a practiced grace. Their movements were fluid, almost serpentine. One of them, the one with the jaguar mask, began to chant. The words were guttural, unknown to Peeka, but they carried a weight, a resonance that seemed to vibrate in his very bones. The other emissary, the serpent, produced a gourd. It was filled with a liquid, thick and viscous. It pulsed with an inner light. Unnatural. The serpent-masked figure offered the gourd to the jaguar. He drank deeply. A low growl escaped his throat. Peeka watched transfixed. He couldn't tear his gaze away. The ceremony was mesmerizing, terrifying. He felt a growing sense of unease. Something was wrong. He could feel it in the pit of his stomach, but he couldn't pinpoint what it was. Kimu. A young man, barely a man really, he stood before the altar, his face pale, his body trembling. He was this year's chosen, the sacrifice. Peeka felt a pang of pity for the boy. He knew what awaited him, the price of their continued existence. The jaguar-masked emissary gestured. Two villagers, their faces grim, stepped forward. They grabbed Kimu. He didn't struggle. He knew resistance was futile. His fate was sealed. He would appease the gods or die trying. The jaguar-masked figure raised a ceremonial dagger. It glinted in the firelight, obsidian, sharper than any blade Peeka had ever seen. The jaguar brought the dagger down, a swift, clean stroke. Kimu crumpled to the ground, his blood staining the parched earth a gruesome crimson. The chanting reached a fever pitch. The villagers watched, their faces a mixture of horror and morbid fascination. Peeka felt sick. He had seen death before. It was a constant companion in the jungle. But this was different. This was ritualistic, cold. Section 6, Twisted Transformations. The air grew heavy, suffocating. The chanting reached a crescendo. The jaguar-masked emissary stood over Kimu's body. He was no longer chanting. He was convulsing, his body racked with spasms. The mask he wore, the jaguar, it began to shift. The once static features contorted, twisted into a grotesque parody of the animal it was meant to represent. The eyes glowed with an infernal light. The fangs, once mere carvings extended, became real, dripping with saliva. The serpent-masked figure underwent a similar transformation. The mask melted away, revealing a face that was both reptilian and humanoid. Scales shimmered under the firelight. A forked tongue darted in and out of a mouth filled with needle-like teeth. The villagers watched in horrified silence. Peeka stared, his blood turning to ice in his veins. This was not a ceremony, this was an abomination. The emissaries were not holy men, they were monsters, wearing the skins of men. Section 7, A Desperate Flight. Panic seized Peeka. He had to get away. He had to warn the others. This was madness. The creatures, the things that wore the faces of men, they were not gods. They were demons. And they had been tricked, lured here. He turned to run, but it was too late. The jaguar creature, its eyes burning like hot coals, saw him. It let out a roar, a sound that was both animal and something else. Something ancient, evil. The villagers screamed. They scattered, fleeing in terror. Peeka didn't hesitate. He plunged into the jungle. He could hear the creatures behind him, crashing through the undergrowth, their roars echoing through the trees. He pushed himself harder. His lungs burned. His legs screamed for respite, but he didn't stop. He could feel their presence behind him, close, getting closer. He risked a glance over his shoulder. The jaguar creature was gaining on him. Its eyes glowed in the fading light. A horrifying grin split its face, revealing rows of razor-sharp teeth. Section 8, The Terror Lingers. The sounds of pursuit faded. Peeka didn't slow down. He couldn't. Not yet. Not until he knew he was safe. He pushed himself to the very edge of exhaustion. His body a symphony of pain. He didn't know how long he ran. Time had lost all meaning. The jungle, once familiar, was now a hellscape. Every rustle of leaves, every snapping twig sent his heart racing. The darkness held its breath, waiting, watching. He collapsed beside a stream. The cool water, a balm on his parched throat. He drank deeply, trying to ignore the tremors that racked his body. He had escaped, for now. But the memory of what he had seen, what he had learned, it would stay with him, forever. He looked up at the canopy above. The leaves swayed in the breeze, whispering secrets he couldn't understand. But one thing was clear. The jungle held dangers far greater than he could have ever imagined. Section 9, Scars on the Soul. Peeka never returned to his village. He couldn't, not after what he had seen. The memory of the ritual, the monstrous transformation of the emissaries, it haunted his waking hours, invaded his dreams, turning them into nightmares. He wandered the jungle, a ghost of his former self, haunted by the knowledge of the darkness that lurked within the heart of the green world. He knew the truth, the horrifying truth. The emissaries weren't holy men, they were deceivers, worshippers of something ancient and evil. And he had been their pawn, tricked into leading them to his village, to his people. The guilt clawed at him, a constant weight on his soul. He should have known, he should have seen through their charade. He was a hunter, he was supposed to be observant, perceptive. But he had failed, and now his people would pay the price. He could only hope that they had escaped, that they had found refuge. But deep down, he knew the truth. The jungle was vast, unforgiving, and the creatures that lurked within its depth, they showed no mercy.